Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to continue working on the project that we started last time. So last time we made this web page and we made a toggle button which turns fireworks on and turns them off if you click the button again. It also changes the text on the fireworks. In our code, we learned how to declare variables. We also learned about if statements and extended our onFireworks button click function. So today, the first thing that I want to do is add a new tag to our HTML code. This. So this tag is called div. And div is just a container tag, which we can assign properties to. So here we're setting the ID attribute to cursor chords panel. And here we have a new attribute that we haven't talked about before, and it's the style attribute. The style attribute is just a set of properties that change the way an element looks. So here we set the font size to 36 pixels and set the text align to center. Next, I'm going to paste a block of code. Oh, by the way, the style attribute here is the same thing as this style. It's just here we're setting style properties through JavaScript, and here we're setting them through HTML. So this block of code works with mouse coordinates. This variable is the object is assigned the value, the object in the DOM hierarchy with this ID, which is this div element here. And this function takes the input parameter mouse event, takes its pageX property, pageY property, assigns it to the X variable and the Y variable, and then sets the inner HTML of this object, which, if you remember, is everything inside of these two tags. And it sets it to this this line, which just shows the value of the variable, its type, and same for the second variable. So this here is an input parameter, and we haven't really talked about these yet earlier. So when you call a function, if it has no input parameters, the brackets are empty, like in this function here. But sometimes functions can have parameters sent in, like this function here. And here we just put in one value. And then the function uses this value. Same kind of idea here. We have input parameter. And when the function is called, this input parameter is passed in, and the function can then work with it. Now, in JavaScript, there is a concept called events and event handlers. Events are pretty much actions that can happen to a web page. Anything from clicking a button to just moving the mouse around the screen. An event handler is a function which is called when an event happens, when a certain event happens. And then it does an according action. And we actually already have an event handler here. So here we specify that our onClick event handler is this function, which means that when a click action happens to this button, it calls this function. We can also set them through JavaScript. And here, when you set them in JavaScript, you have to specify the object in the DOM hierarchy to which you want to set it to, its name, and then set it equal to the function name. And this should attach the event handler. So here we attach the get cursor chords event handler to the onmousemove event. So when a mouse moves, we should see the cursor coordinates. And yeah, you can see them here. And you can see that every time we move the mouse, in the X and the Y coordinates change in the inspector. So what are these numbers? These numbers are the X and Y coordinates of the mouse. When coordinates in HTML start in the upper left corner at 0, 0. And when you move your mouse horizontally, here I'll move it along the top border. The Y value should stay around 0 and the X increases. Y is vertical distance from the upper left corner. So when I move it along the left border, the X should stay around 0 and the Y should increase accordingly. We can also attach this event handler to other elements other than the document, which is the main element, and the DOM hierarchy. So now we're going to attach this event handler to body. Now, if we save it and refresh, you can see that it works, except that if we go past this div, the coordinates don't update. And that's because this is outside of the body tag. So here, if we hover over the body tag in the inspector, you'll notice that it only wraps around the two elements which are inside of it. And the yellow area around it is a margin. So space between the body tag and the edge of the screen, which is also not part of it. So if we go past the button here, it will not change. And usually it's set to the default margin, which is around 8 pixels. We can also attach this event handler to our button that we made earlier. So here we're going to refresh it. And when we move the cursor on the button, the coordinates change. But once we go past, the coordinates stop changing. For now, we're going to leave it as document because we want the coordinates to display, we want the coordinates to change no matter where our mouse is on the screen. So now, this is how you set an event handler in JavaScript. It's not very different from setting an event handler in HTML functionality-wise, but there's one difference. If we go to our page, you'll notice that in the button with the onClick event handler, we have the attribute actually shown in the element. But here, I'm going to change this event handler to be set from JavaScript. So first I'm going to delete it, and it doesn't work because there's no event handler. And now I'm going to set button.onClick equals this function. When we save it and reload it, this should still work, except we don't see the event handler in here, which can be a bit confusing sometimes if you have an error in a program and you need to figure out which tag has which event handler. Now we can also set the this onmousemove event handler in HTML. So first I'm going to delete it and show that it doesn't work. And then here we add an onmousemove attribute and set it to this function with event as an input parameter. Event is just an object generated automatically by JavaScript when an event is made. So now if we refresh it, when we mouse over the button, the coordinates change. But since the event handler is attached to the button, when we move away from the button, it stops displaying the coordinates. And in HTML, there's no way that we can attach an event handler to the HTML tag. We can attach it to the body tag, but as we saw before, it isn't very helpful. So we have to set it in JavaScript. In conclusion, you should set the event handlers in the HTML code if it is possible. If it's not possible, then you kind of have to set it in JavaScript. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the style attribute to the button. And this style attribute increases the width of a button, the height of a button. PX is short for pixels, so this is 140 pixels, 50 pixels, and we change the font size to 16 pixels. But the main change is that we set the position to absolute. When we are creating an HTML tag, by default, it sets the position property to relative. And what that means is the elements are displayed in order that they are created. So going back to our web page, first it shows the button, and then right below is the div element, because they're created in that order. If we were to switch around the div and the button, then their order would change as well. The div would be above and the button below. But with position set to absolute, the button can be anywhere on the screen, regardless where the other elements are. And we can change its position on the screen with the properties top and left. And we're going to be setting these properties in a second. So I'm going to copy 2 more lines of code to our getCursorChords function. and they change the coordinates of a button, the properties top and left of a button, to the Y value of a mouse and the X value. The top property of a button is the distance, the vertical distance from the top of the screen. So it's Y coordinate. And the left property is horizontal distance from the left edge of the screen. So it's X coordinate. And we are setting the buttons, and here we're setting the button to be where the mouse is. And that's what it should do in theory. But if we refresh a page, you'll notice that the button doesn't follow the mouse around. But when we move the mouse to the top edge or the left edge to the screen, the button shifts. And this seems really weird, but there's a really simple explanation for this. In order to show it, I'll add 2 lines of code. These 2 lines, they display in the console the type of the button's top and left properties, and then the values of both of these properties. So now if we save and refresh and go into console, you'll notice that both of these properties are of type string, and their value is an empty string. And we know that because if it was null, then it would say null. But in here, these coordinates, these mouse coordinates, have a number value. In here, we are setting a number value into a text property. And so the number is just converted into text and put in here. And the reason this doesn't work is because we didn't specify the units that we are working in. So there are different types of units for measuring where a point is on the screen. For example, in HTML, there are 2 types of units are pixels and percentage of the screen. And so in here, since we don't specify the units, the browser doesn't know if we mean 50 pixels away from the edge, from the top edge of the screen, or 50% of the screen. So, but then the reason the button shifts is because when the coordinate is 0, it doesn't matter what unit it is, and the browser just sets it to 0 because 0% of the screen and 0 pixels are still the exact same thing. So to fix this, we need to add the string, the suffix px at the end, which is just the units for pixels. Oh, by the way, this plus sign in JavaScript means 2 different things. When you're doing math, like adding 2 numbers together, it works like the way you think it would. So if we do like y plus 10, it will add 10 to y. But when we add text together, what it does is it just attaches these 2 pieces of text together. And here we're adding a number and a string. And so they are added together. And they look like this here. So now if we refresh the page after this change, you'll notice that it works now, and the button actually follows the mouse around. And you can see the top and left coordinates changing, and they also change here and here. And when we click the button, the fireworks still work. So now we can actually perform math on these y values and x values. For example, if we add, let's just say 50 to y and 50 to x, this is what happens. So the button is running away from the cursor, and we can't actually click it if we want to. And the reason it doesn't just glue 50 at the end of the y variable is because JavaScript works from left to right. So at first it adds these two numbers, and only then it adds this text. We can also do other math, like multiply by 2. So if we multiply it by 2 and refresh, you'll notice that the button is twice as far away from the top left corner as our mouse. And we can never click on the button unless we somehow move it to 0, 0. We can also divide the y value and the x value. And so when we refresh it, the button is only half the distance from the top left corner from the mouse. And we can actually click on the button here. And today, I would like to give you guys homework. So your homework for next session is to make it so that instead of the mouse being just on the corner of a button, move the button so that the mouse is centered on it, like in this example here. And my hint for you guys is you have to, in some way, use the width and the height of a button for this. So does anyone have any questions?
What would happen if you put x in the second value? Like instead of putting a number, you would put x, like y plus x or something.
We can actually do that. So
yeah,
we do y plus x. And so if we refresh this, if we move the mouse along the x, the button will also move along the y-axis. You can play around with this and see what kind of weird stuff you can do with this. Yeah, there's a lot you can do. Any other questions?
In pixels, how big is like the grid? Is it like 1,000 pixels or 1,000 by 1,000 or?
It depends on your screen. So in here, let's see. Okay, so here the inspector says my screen is 100, my window is 1,280 pixels wide, and oh, well, this is only 58 pixels, but if we move our mouse here, it's like 300 something pixels. But if we resize this, this will only go to like 600. It depends on your screen. Any other questions? Okay, if there are no other questions, then this is probably it for today. Once you're done your homework, publish it on your website and Google Sites. And then once I post this lesson on YouTube, just link your website in the comments below and I'll check your homework. So thank you for listening, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.